So
Now,
true.
let's talk about it. You know what I'm going to talk about. You know what I'm going to talk about. I know you don't get fired up. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up DEI.
Hmm.
So, is DEI now DEAD, as in dead? Did it
Hmm.
ever really exist in the first place as it was intended to? And the follow up to that, Jasmine, is as a young Black woman, what do some of the changes under the new US administration mean to you in your career?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had like a cookie cutter answer for this, but I don't. Like I'm
Mm,
holding multitudes of different emotions and feelings about DEI. I do think, in its current state and form, it is dead. And I think I, it's so funny to me because there's this massive group of people in America who decided, you know, to kill it.
mhm,
And they decided that it's this one thing. And all it reminds me of, I just keep seeing this parallel, not to get too political, is Obamacare. That's what it
mm,
reminds me of. Because if we rewind, 8, 12 years, the
mhm,
Affordable Health Care Act was passed, and it basically provided, low cost or very accessible health care to essentially all Americans, but specifically low income Americans. Now, I'm not a doctor. I'm not in the medical system. I do have friends in the medical system who hated it, right? They were
mhm,
like, this is the
mhm,
worst thing that ever happened to doctors, and we made less money and whatever. To me, that's neither here nor there, right? What I thought was so interesting, that the use of language is so important,
mm,
because it was branded Obamacare and it was not branded the Affordable Care Act.
mm,
And so you had millions of people who would qualify for the Affordable Care Act who did not currently have a health insurance, who were actively voting against it because it was called Obamacare and they
mm.
did not support Obama, right? And so when the Affordable Health Care Act was kind of rolled back, or it was being repealed, and all of these people were losing, access to health insurance, and like, I need these prescriptions and I need this doctor, and I'm finding out, that I'm losing access to this and I can't pay for it. It was only then that they were finding out that they, in fact, were on Obamacare.
Of course.
And so that's what it
Wow.
makes me, and we all thought that was just like so ridiculous at the time, right? But DEI is the same thing. DEI has been the language of it has been weaponized,
1000%.
right? So I saw something on LinkedIn that said we should make people spell it out. Like, you should say diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then tell us exactly from those three words which ones that you have a problem with. Don't just say DEI, because DEI is like the new woke, which was the old
Yeah,
Obamacare. It's just a
yeah.
branded version so they could sell it to the masses as like, this is the problem. I'm giving it to you in a bite-sized piece. So you don't have to think about the nuance of what we're actually talking about. And so, honestly, the writing was on the wall for a long time. Like, people genuinely, this idea of you know, it's so hard to be a white man in America right now. Like,
Mm,
where no
mm,
one cares about us right now. And
mm,
I remember watching an old sitcom, How I Met Your Mother, and there was an episode where the main character was auditioning to be a news anchor. She's a white woman, and they were like, oh, how'd the audition go? And she's like, oh my gosh, when I got there, everyone was so much more interesting than me. There was a black woman there with blue eyes. And she basically said that in the sense that, like, I'm never gonna get this job because there was a black woman with blue eyes. Like, she was so interesting, and she's black.
mhm.
And so, it's crazy because that show came out, what, like 10, 15 years ago. So it's like the idea has been seeded to this country for a very long time, in a funny way, in an approachable way. Oh, you go to a job interview as a white man, and there's a black man in a wheelchair, and you're like, I'll never get this job because it's going to go to the black man in the wheelchair. It's like a 2 for 1.
Mm.
Or on 30 Rock, with Tina
Mhm,
Fey,
mhm.
them calling the black character Twofer because he was black and he also went to Harvard.
Right,
Right. So they're like,
right,
oh, it's a
right.
2 for 1. And
Yeah,
that's why his nickname was Twofer. So it's like, it's been
yeah.
seeded in
Mhm,
this very nonchalant way that DEI and diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts have specifically and only benefited Black people who are also somehow not qualified to do the jobs that they're being brought in to do. They're blaming plane crashes on DEI. They're making it seem like we're putting pilots in planes that don't have degrees or the correct certifications simply because they're Black or they're a woman, or it's ridiculous. But it's a easy story. It's an easy bite story. And so what people fail to realize is that DEI actually overwhelmingly benefits white women, because at first it was about equality of the sexes in the workplace, right?
Gender equality.
Oprah tells the story all the time about how she was a news anchor and she was making substantially less than her white counterpart. And when she asked why, they said, well, he has a family to support and you don't. And even though y'all do the same job for the same amount of time, he deserves more money than you. So DEI actually was helping to correct that. Now, I don't think that DEI, I don't think it was all good. You know what I mean? I think there were improvements that could be made, but DEI wasn't just giving Black people jobs. It was also ensuring that there were ramps for people who are differently abled, reintegrating veterans into workplaces so people understood, people with learning disabilities or mental disabilities, physical, people who are differently abled, making sure that there were concessions made so that all Americans had a fair shot at employment. That's what it was. So it's interesting again to watch this country vote against its own interests. And in the next, I've already seen the TikToks of people crying about feeling like they were tricked and, oh, I lost my job, or I lost my farm. I lost, I'm losing my prescriptions. I'm losing my food stamps. Now really putting it together once again that I have voted against my own interests. And so, I think for the time being, it desperately needs a rebrand. We need to re-strategize, and we need to, especially as a Black woman, a lot of people keep asking me how I feel being in the corporate space and am I scared? And how do I say this?
Just say it.
A lot of times I felt like some of the programs that I went through, I would not be where I'm at without those programs. But I also felt like a lot of times I was getting pat on the head and saying, oh my God, you're so good for being like a Black girl.
Yeah, it felt disingenuous.
I mean? It's a scarlet letter sometimes to be in these programs, or simply to be existing as a Black person, because for some reason people think that every Black person in the workplace is somehow the result of DEI.
A diversity hire.
Yeah, everyone's a diversity hire, which is crazy, right? Especially knowing that if you're a Black person in America, they're going to make sure you can do that job 80 times over before they hire you. So if anything, we're overqualified for the positions that we're in, and we watch people fail forward, in other situations. And it's like, how did they get there? Like the police commissioner of New York not being a police officer, but she's the daughter of a billionaire. How did that work? But I'm the diversity hire because I'm Black, but maybe I spent my whole life on the force. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where it's just like upskilling, making sure that we are bulletproofing our careers by, that's really all you can do, in my opinion. My opinion is to, I told a lot of people in my friend group to shift out of careers that were solely based on DEI. Like I saw the writing on that wall.
100%.
Because if you only have a job because people feel bad about something, so they're making these like grand sweeping statements about how they care and how they want to help, but it's not something that they've really been committed to the whole time. If you work at Ben and Jerry's, you're safe. But everywhere else, it's like you can't. I just don't think it's the smartest thing to base your whole career about it. I think we should all be working towards it and contributing towards it, but basing your whole career around it is dangerous in this climate. And we don't know when this is going to be over. So I would just say upskilling, networking, strengthening your networks. And we all need an exit plan. We all need an exit plan. I think it looks different for everyone. What your exit plan might be out the country. Your exit plan might be, my favorite LinkedIn profile is a guy who was like one of the first couple of employees at Google, and now he's a goose farmer. And like his resume is like 20 years at Google, or however long, and then goose farmer in Peru.
That's hilarious. Love it. Love
To
it.
me, that's dope because it's like we all need that exit plan. We just might need it a little bit earlier than we think. So
Yeah.
side hustles, upskilling, things like that. And then let's actually, and like I said, my good friend Gabby, she runs Kitchen Table, which is a phenomenal agency out of New York that works on a lot of marquee brands. She's been saying she founded in part with other creators that I don't know their names right now, but they're also titans in their own right.
Mm-hmm.
It's a conference called Black Week, and the
Mm-hmm.
first one was this past year, and
Yeah, I
it's
heard
really
about it.
just like a meeting, yeah, meeting of the minds of just all these titans. And she's been saying for years, like, we need a rebrand, we need a restructure, we need to
Mm-hmm.
re-strategize, like, and I don't think we have the answer.
Ooh. Yeah. Don't worry. My son fell.
Look, got excited.
I got
I don't think
excited.
I don't think we have the answer, and I don't think there is a clear answer. I don't think there
Yeah.
is, oh, we should be doing this. It's like, no, we need our titans to sit down and figure out
Yeah.
what we're gonna do.
Yeah. There's so many things you just shared there. Rebrand 100%. I even feel like even with Black Lives Matter, I
Hmm.
saw similar things happening too. I felt like the statement behind that needed a rebrand because I saw how people are going to manipulate it from the beginning, from the get
Yeah.
go. Um, but I do feel you're right. I think one of the things that people can do, going back to the statement I mentioned before, focusing on what you can control, building
Hmm.
relationships with people. I think I remember Trevor Noah. I read his book, Born a Crime, and he said, you know, one of the interesting things about hate or racism is he's like, it's hard to hate somebody that you know.
Yeah.
It's easy to hate people that you don't know, or if
In
it's they
theory.
live over there in theory, right? You know what I
Hmm.
mean? When you actually know someone from a different community, and when people are like saying like these outlandish things about a specific community, you're like, actually, I know somebody from that community. They are nothing like what you guys are talking about. So I
Hmm.
think building relationships with people in your respective industry, what have you, is a great way to kind of future proof your career, if you will. And I think one of the interesting things about DEI, because obviously for me too, because working in tech as a black person
Hmm.
specifically, you're probably going to be the only one or one of very few in whatever
Right.
department you're in. And so sometimes, at least for me, I don't want to speak for you, that narrative can kind of seep in your head, right? Like,
Hmm.
did they put me here because I'm a diversity hire and they want to kind of
Yeah.
round their bases, right? It'll cross your mind. I remember even had a conversation about X about that, and he's like, Corey,
Hmm.
he's like, man, you just got to remember you are the only you in your room, irrespective of race, creed, religion, color. Just remind yourself of that. And I
Right.
think if a person, I always thought to myself, if a person ever came to me and tried to articulate in some way that I am a diversity hire,
Hmm.
I had to think about how I would address that. What would my thought process be? And I think about the basic way that people hire people. Human nature tells us that in most cases, people hire people who look like them.
Yeah,
That
it's
is
a
one of
herd
the major.
mentality.
It's a herd mentality. So
Mhm.
for someone to say, "Hey, you got hired because you're this color or this background," I could easily say, "Well, you got hired because you look just like them."
Yeah.
You know what I'm
And now
saying?
we're all looking stupid here. Okay.
Right.
Like, now what?
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. But I do feel like, to your point, the pendulum always swings. I did see the writing on the wall, and I agree with you. People that took those, VP of DEI
Yeah.
positions, I knew that their time was very limited. And those people, if they were being honest, I remember I had a conversation with someone in that position. I was like, how much like impact can you really make in that position? Are they giving you a budget? Are they
Yeah.
actually implementing programs that you can actually execute? Or is it just like a token position?
And a lot
And
of
I
them were actively saying that they weren't getting that. When the great
mhm,
resignation kind of happened around early last year, when all these major companies, their DEI heads were departing or being fired
right,
or being allowed to leave, but we all know how that conversation goes.
right,
They were saying they never got the funding they were promised. They never got
right,
the support or even the authority. If you have a VP title and you can't make a decision that sweeps
mhm,
through the
mhm,
company, are you a VP? You
right,
know? Or are you just someone that comes in on Black History Month and, Women's History Month, and
Yeah.
it's a glorified content play.